So next up, we're going to have Joe Fazio from Flume Water talk to us about Texas single-family per capita trends. Joe is a 30-year veteran of the computer software industry with deep experience in product marketing and strategy. At Flume, Joe provides its utility partners with deep granular water use analysis that's used for planning, optimization, and conservation. I believe Joe's going to be joined by Peter Mayer and Sarah Musiker as well, and I'll let him introduce them as he gets started. But for those of you who haven't seen some of the insights from the magnitude of data that Joe and all the folks at Flume have been collecting on water use in Texas, I think you're really in for a treat. So thank you. And thanks, Joe and company, for joining us. We're getting it up on the screen here. We'll let you know. Oh, I think he's going to share his screen. Okay.
Can you guys see that okay?
Looks good.
Yep.
Great. Thanks for having us, Martha, and thanks for the introduction. And as you said, I've got Peter Mayer with me here and Sarah Musiker as well. I think Sarah Musiker is on here with us.
I'm here.
Great. I'm going to let Sarah go ahead and kick things off, and then Peter and I are going to delve into the data.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for the warm welcome. We're really excited to be here. As Joe said, my name is Sarah Musiker. I direct our utility programs here at Flume, and we're really excited to be joining you all today. Perhaps many of you have heard of us, perhaps others of you haven't. For those that are kind of new to us, Flume is a company that really collects and analyzes water use data from households all across the country. Joe, I think you're advancing, or someone's advancing the slides.
That was me. Sorry.
It's okay.
I was going to where I thought you were in the
Giving everyone
presentation.
a sneak peek to where we're going, so it's great. So it's no problem. Just I'll have you go back to the first slide and we can kind of just jump on from there. But basically, as I mentioned, we collect and analyze water use data from households all across the country. We work with systems that have AMI fully deployed. We also work with systems that don't have AMI, are going to AMI, or for whom AMI will literally never work for them. And we're kind of happy to work with all of communities related to this. We often present our data to our network of utility partners and customers quarterly as part of an ongoing effort to consistently collect, analyze, and report out on real-time water use, both what the water use looks like and then just trends in general across the United States. And today we'll be looking at some Texas-specific data, really examining end use by appliance and fixture from some of the largest data set of this type ever collected, which is pretty cool. This is both year over year and also from Q4 of 2021. Joe, do you mind backing up one more slide? I'm just going to give a quick intro to Peter and myself. Thanks. So for those that you don't know Peter, he's the principal of water DM and a strategic partner of Flume. Over his career, Peter has worked with hundreds of water utilities and organizations across the US and Canada, and really is an end use research expert. Joe, I think they already got an intro to you, and then that's me on the end. We don't need to go into me. So now you can go to the next slide again. Thank you. Some of you, as I mentioned, maybe you're already familiar with us already, but for very quick response, who is Flume? We're really big believers that you can't manage what you can't measure. And since our founding, our work is really aimed to liberate water data from the meter so that we can provide real-time insights into what's actually happening in your community and in homes across the country. And we really made it our mission to empower people with better data and information that they need to make decisions. And you can go to the next slide. To talk a little bit about how we do this, we have a sensor that essentially hugs the meter. And we're, like I said, we work with many different types of meters. This is self-installed, usually actually by the end customer in under 10 minutes. And it's intended exclusively for single family residences. So I do want to provide the caveat that all of the data we're going to be presenting here comes from single family residences. It immediately begins measuring water use every 5 seconds and then uploads that data to the cloud, where it is actually accessible by customers and utilities in real time to really begin to unstack water use based off of volume, pressure, and more, and provide these real-time insights that allow customer-specific action to address leaks, to address a number of just different challenges, perhaps help them manage their water use a little bit more. But we also analyze and provide this data to utilities to really actually look at, I think some of the questions that have been brought up so far today, which is, great, we have all this data, what do we do with it now? Joe, do you mind jumping to the next slide? Thank you. So as I mentioned, once installed, all that information is immediately online. As I said, for customers, we really provide them with that information and it's directly on their cell phones. We do push notifications for leaks. We give them water budgets. We allow them to monitor their use in real time. And this is separated by indoor and outdoor use, but also by appliance and fixture itself. And for utilities, we provide a dashboard where they can see both customer specific or aggregated data across their community, or both, up to them. And we provide these reports and analytics, really allowing people to dive into average and indoor outdoor, GPCD, GPHD, the impact of weather and drought restrictions on outdoor water use, how key consumption metrics compare to neighboring metro areas, detailed analysis of leakage, detailed analysis by end use and fixture, and really more. And our goal is really to enable smarter planning, because this can be used to address water loss, conserve water, increase customer satisfaction, improve land management and population growth planning, and really any kind of insight you're hoping to look for to address local needs and concerns. Do you mind going to the next slide, Joe? And we think that this data is pretty revolutionary. We're pretty excited about it. For context, generally when we talk about the history of end use studies, or really end use reports overall, there's been a lot of room for improvement. Sample size of all previous end use studies was approximately 3,000 homes and around 300,000 water use events. So that was really everything. For the Flume Water Use Index, which is where we report out all this information, most recently we've examined over 11 million water use events over the course of months, and in some instances even years. Previously, the devices were placed in a home for like 2 weeks or so. And so it was actually just measuring a spot in time rather than actual long-term patterns. The Flume device is placed on a home and really stays there forever. And so you can pull out water use depending on season, depending on time. Looking at obviously 2020 and 2021 are two very different instances, and really interesting to see. Also, it's just generally really expensive for a utility to do a study themselves. For context, this device is $150. And then this is my last slide, and then I'll be turning it over to you all. So we're pretty excited about what we're doing. As I mentioned, we have tens of thousands of these devices pulling data in real time all across the country. They're installed by the homeowner, which removes a lot of administrative limitations or burdens. And we actually do this with a lot of our programs, as we really try to develop programs that actually remove as much administrative burden as possible to make it really, really easy for you to get these devices out in the field. We're also going to be reporting water use to you from December 2021 at the beginning of February, which is pretty incredible. In the past, this type of end use analysis probably would have taken a year or more to complete. And so we're able to do this really, really fast. And we have data going back to 2019. So we're looking at arguably around 115 weeks of continuous end use data in the study. And when we talk about why this matters, Joe, you can go to the next slide. End use disaggregation really enables tracking of who's using water, when it's being used, where the water is going, and how it's being used, and even why it's in use or why it isn't changing over time. And this is a perfect example of that. So this is actually what we get to see kind of on our end. And what you're looking here is actually a full month of use for a single household. Each line represents a day. So on the left side, you're looking at the start at midnight. On the right side, you're going to the midnight at the end of that day. And really looking at these, you're able to actually start pulling out patterns of use and saying this 5-second data allows us to really identify what is really happening. And you start to recognize patterns. So for example, here you'll notice a timed irrigation event that's happening in the morning. That's really great to see. But also, are people irrigating outside? We're able to identify these manual irrigation events as well, in addition to indoor water use. This is just an example of some outdoor stuff, but we also can kind of play around with this based off of specific appliance and fixtures you might want to look at. So this is another great example. We actually had a very specific request to look at water softeners. Does this community use water softeners? How many people are using them? And so we were able to identify the water use pattern of a water softener and actually pull that out again for the community to really look at. And this is just kind of a sampling of what we'll be doing kind of for the next 30 minutes, where we're going to actually hopefully just 20, so we can do questions as well. But really looking at specific appliance and fixture level end use analysis and a lot more. So Joe and Peter, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thanks, Sarah. Give me 1 second to just kind of shift gears here and get the right thing up.
So what Sarah was describing was really the history of this type of research. And Flume is really sort of, just the pinnacle of really what is 30 years of this type of data collection and analysis, where you attach a device to the water meter and collect, high resolution flow data from the meter and then interpret that. So it's really cool to see how this concept that I've really worked on for a lot of my career has tremendously advanced through having so many devices across the country.
Yeah, and it's great because now they're all there, and someone comes to us and says, "Hey, we're trying to understand water use in our area," and we can say, "Hey, we've got 500 flumes already installed in your area from people that bought these on Amazon," and we can start to take a look at the data. So it's kind of cool to be able to do that without a whole lot of burden of getting the data collectors in place. And that's kind of a good segue here, Peter. We have these things all over the nation now. They're mostly centered in metro areas, but they're starting to leak out into more of the less urban areas. But specifically in Texas, what we're going to be talking about today, we have, I think it's almost 20,000 devices deployed in Texas now. And as you can see here, they're kind of centered around the major in Texas, certainly Dallas, Houston, and why can't I come up with the other one? Austin, sorry, Austin, Dallas, Houston, Austin, and actually San Antonio as well. And we're starting to get a little hot spot here in Midland as well. So when I'm talking about water use today, we're going to be looking specifically at all of these flumes that are collecting data in Texas. And then for a portion of this too, we'll start to break down the numbers for each of these different metro areas. So let's first take a look at indoor use. And what we're looking at here is 2 full years of indoor use. And again, all of this data was collected by the flumes that are in Texas. And along the x-axis, we basically have time. So starting all the way back in January 2020, going all the way through the end of last year, so the end of 2021. And then on the y-axis, what we're looking at is the average indoor GPCD, so gallons per person per day in Texas. Peter, I'll turn it over to you. I think the obvious thing on this chart, and I know a lot of people have seen this now, but the obvious thing on this chart is kind of this big blip here during COVID times.
Yeah, we had this COVID lockdown that happened, and this remarkable increase in indoor GPCD that really occurred across the country. The magnitude varies a bit, but this is something that we've been able to observe through the Flume data really in every part of the United States as this occurred. The overall trend, though, in indoor use is actually a declining trend actually towards greater efficiency. And in the fourth quarter here of the most recent quarter of 2021, the average indoor gallons per person per day across the state was 42.8 gallons per person per day. We know the number of people in each house because that is something that is reported when the device is actually installed. And so we're only calculating this for homes where we actually have those data. Maybe we could just focus in on the fourth quarter and take a look at a little bit closer at what's going on just in this most recent period. So one of the things that you can see is a couple of little spikes. I think one is Thanksgiving, probably right there, and then another increase in indoor use towards the Christmas and New Year's holiday too. Something else that is kind of expected, but I don't know that we've ever been able to see it quite at this level of resolution before.
In fact, Peter, you and I have been working on a lot of specific reports for different communities, and it's kind of fun to see the blip at this level, just at the indoor level, but you and I have been kind of delving into what goes in to make up this indoor use, and it was very funny to look at dishwasher use, and specifically dishwasher use was just really peaked on both Thanksgiving Day and Christmas Day. So that was kind of interesting to see as well, kind of what makes that up.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're able to explain differences. And so if you just look at the comparison now between metro areas. So this is the average gallons per person per day for indoor water use for 4 metro areas in Texas: Dallas, San Antonio, Houston, and Austin. And so this is quite similar, actually, I would say. From the range is from 41, the low in Austin, up to 42.9 in Dallas. But overall, in the low 40s is a relatively efficient level of indoor water use. Previous studies, 20 years ago, we were measuring indoor use at about 69 gallons per person per day. The 2016 end-use study measured it at about 56 gallons per person per day. But we knew that with WaterSense and more efficient fixtures, it was possible to go down to 35 gallons per person per day. So I think these data are really bearing out the fact that efficient fixtures and appliances can make a big difference in water use.
Well, that's a good segue to this chart, Peter. What we took a look at, and we looked specifically at San Antonio for this analysis, because we have a lot of flumes in San Antonio area. And what we did is we took a look at when each home was built that each flume was attached to. And then we looked at the average toilet flush volume for each of those houses that kind of fall into these home age buckets. And again, this something that we assumed was that newer homes were going to have more efficient fixtures, but it's kind of fun to see this play out in the data.
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of really interesting things, I think, to point out. First of all, the average flush volume has gone down even since the 2016 residential end use of water study. And then at the newest homes, the homes that are built, 2000 after 2012, are the most efficient homes. Those are the homes with toilet flushes that are most likely to be in the low flow, the ultra low flow range completely. Then once you get to homes that go back through the 2000s and 90s and to the 80s, it doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of difference really what year the home was built. The toilet efficiency is all quite similar. They've all reduced from some historical average, and by probably over time, as new fixtures and more efficient fixtures are installed, we'll continue on a similar trajectory towards what we're seeing with newer homes.
Yeah, and I think this was kind of an interesting point here, right? I think we were talking to Karen Goose last week, and she basically said this is when the code changed in Texas, specifically in San Antonio, I guess, where low flow toilets were actually required in new builds. So interesting to see that was kind of a point of inflection here.
And that's also right about the same time of the creation of the WaterSense program too, which has also spurred additional reductions in the toilets.
All right, let's go ahead and shift gears and let's move outdoors now. And let's take a look at just Q4. And we're basically looking at the average amount of water used per household per day in each of these 4 metro areas. Dallas used the most water per person per day at 6 gallons per household, per household per day. Well, I take that back. I changed this to gallons per capita per day because Karen had asked me to do that. So we usually report this by household outdoor water, but for purposes here, we're doing it by capita.
We can present it a lot of different ways. This is not the most traditional way, certainly, of presenting outdoor use, but
it threw me off a little bit.
The orders of magnitude are no different, right, honestly, because the average number of people in each city is about the same. So the key thing is that there was more outdoor use, both per capita and per household in Dallas. Austin followed by Austin, San Antonio, and then Houston had the lowest, actually.
Right. And I think that's interesting just to get an idea of who was using the most outdoor water. But I think this is even more interesting to take a look at how outdoor water use actually tracks ET pretty darn closely. So let me set this up for you, Peter, and I'll turn it over to you. What we're looking at here is 3 full years, going all the way back to the 1st of January 2019 here. And basically, In blue is the average outdoor water use per person per day. So for the 3 years, so basically this is the summer of 2019, the summer of 2020, and then the summer of 2021. And then in orange, what we have here is reference ET for San Antonio. And again, we're just looking at San Antonio here so that we could map it with ET. And down here, we have precipitation for each of those days. So Peter, I'll turn this over to you for a little analysis.
Well, first of all, what a fabulous depiction of outdoor residential water use over 3 years. And there's some important things to understand. Year one in 2019 was a year of unrestricted demand, essentially. Year two, there were drought restrictions, and San Antonio did intentionally sought to decrease demand outdoors. And some of the reductions that you're seeing there were a result of that. And then in 2021, you see the impact of more frequent rainstorms. If you look, so the bottom graph is the precipitation and rainfall. And the biggest difference that Karen noted in 2021 was that the rain came much more frequently, and that contributes. So the demand never built up the same way that it can in the other years. Anyway, this is a technology and data sets that enable utilities to evaluate the impact of things like drought restrictions directly and very quickly, and also the impact of climate right when it's happening.
I think what's most interesting about this chart is this in 2019 was the year of no restrictions placed by San Antonio on its customers. And you can see here this outdoor water use kind of just blows right through the ET curve. I mean, usually we see people over irrigating kind of late season because it gets hot and stuff starts to get brown, but usually not by that much. By placing water restrictions in 2020, that giant kind of peak in kind of the late season didn't happen. It was restricted because it was water restrictions that happened. So kind of interesting to see that. You got a little bit of it happening here, but certainly not by that magnitude.
This chart also illustrates how responsive customers are to changes in the climate. The systems really do get shut off, and customers really are paying attention by and large. And we've got some other data that show that quite interestingly.
Yeah, I think this is another good example of that. What we're looking at here is basically 2 years of Texas outdoor water use. In red is the outdoor water use of people that say they have sprinklers. And then in blue is the outdoor water use of people that say that they water using a hose. And then in orange is people that say that they don't irrigate, basically. So kind of interesting to see that the people that use the sprinklers obviously are using the most outdoor water. But the people that have either a hose or say they don't water are using significantly less outdoor water as you would expect. But Peter, to your point, all three groups react to the weather, right? It's
all three groups react to the weather. Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty amazing actually how these peaks are all very, very coincident. I'm going to just cut to a couple of the most interesting slides here. In fact, this is probably the most interesting and maybe informative of all of these slides. What we did for Texas is we mapped the total water use, the outdoor water use, and the indoor water use for the last 2 years on the same graph. So in the light blue is indoor water use. And as you can tell, when you kind of look at that over 2 years, except for this anomalous kind of COVID times, it's fairly flat. I mean, it's kind of trending a little bit downward, but let's call it flat for all intents and purposes.
The variability across the indoor water use is nothing compared to the variability in outdoor water use. Even that remarkable blip for COVID, the exceptional, extraordinary indoor use event that we've never seen before was nothing compared to like a typical May in Texas for outdoor water use.
Yeah, and so, I mean, if you're looking at areas to conserve, certainly there's probably a little more room to get that indoor number down. I mean, sitting in the low 40s, there's some opportunity there still, but you know, it's this darker blue here, the outdoor water, that's really the opportunity here.
Right, and I think I saw one question people were asking about whether it might be people who are more water efficient who are installing flumes in general. Our experience in San Antonio is that actually it's higher water users, certainly on the outdoor side, at least, that have by and large installed flumes. And we know this also from comparing the average lot size and property value too. We've also done some analysis, not in Texas, but in California, where we compared the flume users to the population using their historic billing data. And on the indoor use, there was indistinguishable. It was highly, really no different from the broader population of single family accounts.
Well, great. That was the extent of the data we wanted to present. I just wanted to make a quick little plug here. Again, we have these flumes almost everywhere now. So if you're interested in us doing some sort of custom analysis for your area, there's all kinds of analysis we can do. Everything from looking at flow rates across meters to looking at specific end uses of water. You know, are your clothes washers efficient? Are the toilets efficient? We can do some pretty cool analysis. So if you're interested, I'll leave this slide up. Please feel free to email either me or Sarah, and we'd be happy to help you out. So with that, I think we left about 12 minutes for questions here, so we can open it up.
You want me to read the questions off, or I didn't know if there's a formal way to do this. I can do either way.
Sure, go ahead and read the questions.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. This is a good one, and I can actually kind of jump in on this. So Jennifer Nations asked if a customer asked me recently if the utility might consider installing a flume to be tampering with a meter, and have utilities pushed back, or have any customers been prevented from their utility from installing a flume. So we've actually done extensive testing on flume devices, as have many of our utility partners, because we do work with utilities all across the country that actually actively promote these devices to their customers. We have done testing that shows that flume does not in any way interfere with the meter itself. Also, the installation process is really simple. It's a rubber strap that's literally stretched, plops on, etc. We have tens of thousands of these installed, and we've never had instances in which it has in any way either disrupted the reading of the meter, reading of AMI meters, or in some way harmed the meter. Also, many of the utility partners we work with actually build language into the contracts that customers sign when they purchase, saying that if any way the customer disrupts the meter or hurts the meter, they're actually fully liable for it, not only for the cost of the flume device itself, but also for the meter itself. But we've never had a problem with that. So it's a great question. I know that there is some sensitivity sometimes in some communities about customers going into meter pits. We've found many ways to work around that, which makes things really, really great. So let me just go through some of the rest of them. Excuse me, I'm just scrolling up. And if one of you sees one in there, by the way, that you wanted to jump in on, please feel free to go ahead. You know, it might be worth discussing really quickly kind of the difference between some of the data we're looking at versus hourly data, or, you know, some of the billing data that many utilities work with. Joe and Peter, can you just talk about kind of how we're able to disaggregate the data that we are?
Well, the big difference is a flume collects data every 5 seconds, and there is no other system, no AMI system that collects data at that high of resolution. The other thing that you need also is a high level of flow resolution, and that's another thing that the technology provides, that you can distinguish between very subtle differences in flow at that 5 second resolution from particularly from these small 5/8 inch, 3/4 inch, 1 inch, 1.5 inch size water meters. Does that get at it, or I mean, there's more I could say on this.
No, that's really helpful, and it might be valuable also really quickly to chat about how do we actually pull water use data from the meter itself. Joe, can you just quickly touch on that?
Sure. We work on the majority of the meters that are out there. which are positive displacement meters. And all of you guys are in the industry, so you probably know a lot more about this than I do. But essentially, there's a magnet that spins in these positive displacement meters, and we can read the magnetic signal that comes off of that spinning magnet. And the rate at which that magnet flows correlates exactly to a flow rate. So as Peter said, every 5 seconds, we sample how far that magnet has spun and we record that. And again, that correlates to a flow. And then that's how we essentially read the flows.
And then what happens is that data then is brought to a device inside the house through a radio signal and then uploaded to the internet through the Wi-Fi connection. And so it's a continuous data stream. The device itself can store some data, so there's any kind of an interruption that you don't lose any data. And that was another problem that we had with old forms of data logging. So it really is an advancement on the data logging, which utilities have done for 20 or 25 years, really since the invention of computers, and even before that with pencil traces. I mean, the concept of understanding the flow through the meter is pretty old in the utility biz, but doing it at this scale and at this high resolution and being able to to aggregate the data in these remarkable ways is something that's we've never seen before.
Great. Joe and Peter, can you talk a little bit about our machine learning process? How did we initially look at and train our models to start identifying indoor and outdoor use or specific appliance and fixtures?
So the process of basically is that there are distinct signatures and things that distinguish a toilet flush from an irrigation event from a clothes washer. And you create a data set of accurate identified water uses. And we've done that through a variety of different ways, through a partnership with Orbitz, in which our device was directly connected with Orbitz. So we knew every single time that an irrigation system was operating. That gave us the ability to recognize thousands and thousands of different irrigation and outdoor water use shapes. And through that, then the machine learning takes that, learns how to recognize these different water use events and applies it to the flow, the actual data that you collect. I'm not explaining this as elegantly as I could, but that in a nutshell is the concept of the machine learning process.
Yeah, if people are really interested in getting to the dirty details, we do have a methodology document that I can share, so just let me know. I'm going to answer one more question from the chat, and then I want to just see if there's any questions from the audience. So Jennifer Walker asked if Flume has ever worked directly with utilities to design or implement a water conservation program, and the answer to that is definitely yes. Two examples immediately come to mind. There's a community in Northern California that relies exclusively on local water, and they were actually at serious risk of running out of water for about 80,000 customers by June of this year, at midpoint last year. And so what they were doing is they were in a mass campaign to get a number of Flumes installed because they really wanted to see where water was going, how customers were using their water. And then they designed specific policies and implemented specific outdoor irrigation limitations or bans specifically around them, and then use the Flume data to track, are people actually doing them? Are people actually listening? And that was really, really valuable to do that. We're also working with another actually large wholesaler in Southern California to look at the future of their water conservation programming overall. California is about to implement a number of pretty strict requirements for both indoor and outdoor water use. And these require, a lot of requirements around, hey, how much water are you currently using? And then kind of creating some reductions for that over time. And so they're using Flume data to actually assess, we've run toilet and rebate or shower rebates for years and years and years. How many people actually are using these? And do we need to continue with these programs? Do we want to continue rebating toilets? Or is there another world in which, or another conservation program that we can begin to implement that might be more effective or might address a need for the customer? They're also using this for a long-term planning of, hey, what is water use going to look like here in the next 20 to 50 years, which can be really, really valuable. Joe, I just want to make sure I'm not misrepresenting anything that we're doing for that study.
No, that's,
okay,
yeah, great. That's definitely, and we're using the whole end use data to inform that. So taking a look at currently where they are in terms of toilet efficiency and shower efficiency and clothes washer efficiency, and then helping them figure out, like you said, where do they go next?
We're also working with utilities on water loss control. Flume data enables you to create a profile of flow through the meter at all the different flow rates and know exactly what volume of flow is passing through at every different flow rate. And so that's very useful for informing on apparent loss. And so that's another area where Flume data are being utilized.
Yeah, there's a lot of applications here. I want to pause though to see if there's any questions from the in-person audience.
Well, I'll just say, Sarah, you mentioned a Northern California utility who was promoting the Flume, and Carrie's actually here and presented on a whole bunch of things this morning, but that was part of it. So that
Carrie is the best. I didn't want to call her out, but we love Carrie.
Any last questions from in the room? If not, thank you so much to Flume, to Joe, Peter, and Sarah for presenting on that. I, as a data person, find it fascinating. So thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Right.
Thank you. So we're going to put up a slide here. Please